Everybody, welcome back to Searching for Political Identity. I'm your host, Brian Escal. Great to be with you. My guest today is Herby Kay. Herby is many things. He's an autodidact. He's a friend of the show. He's an author of a book called A Radical Reset, in which he lays out his political vision, Antipolitism. He's also very brash and blunt, and he talks a lot, but I think he's a great guy and a tremendous intellect, and I think he's got a lot to offer. I always enjoy talking to him. We talked today about his book, of course, that I just mentioned, and his vision for politics. We talked about Donald Trump, of course, Kamala Harris. Interestingly, why he blames Obama for giving us Donald Trump, and what he thinks is ailing our society. So it was a wide-ranging, freewheeling, no holds barred conversation, and I'm still searching for my political identity, as you know. And who's to say if I'm going to agree with Herb at the end of the day? But I will be honest with you and tell you that a lot of what he says rings true. So I am doing my best, guys, to host a wide variety of guests and probe both sides, the progressives, the conservatives, the libertarians, the anarcho-capitalists, which hint, Herb deep down is an anarcho-capitalist. Why is that system better? Because you got to assume that everyone wants the same, right? You got to assume that everyone wants to live in a happy, healthy society. It's just a question of how we get there. Well, I've had some prominent progressive guests lately, and let's just say that Herb does not agree with them. And you might watch this interview and think, oh, I like Herb or I don't like Herb. But the question is, are his ideas right? Because forget what you think about Herb. A lot of people have his views. A lot of people have, for example, Marianne Williamson's views, who I interviewed recently. Who is right? Don't we all just want the same thing? It's very tough. So I hope you guys enjoy this and let me know what you think about it in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for being here. Herb, welcome back.
Good to be here, man.
I got to say, it's nice to have a friend of the show back. I'm a little more relaxed. I had a high profile guest recently.
I saw her yesterday, Marianne Williamson.
Yeah.
She was.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did. She's an interesting person.
She's super. She knows her history, man. She knows her stuff. She's obviously passionate about people and the country.
Knowing stuff and connecting the dots are two different things, I find.
This is the core of it. No, this is the core of it. Put the social stuff to the side for a second, because I would always say I'm socially liberal. I'm socially liberal, but I want to talk about economics. I'm socially liberal, but maybe there's some fringe or new things happening that would make an average person uncomfortable. So maybe I'm experiencing that, but generally socially liberal. But it's all about the economics for me. It's like, what do I believe? Because I'm a good person. I think you're a good person. I think there's a lot of good people out there, right?
Mostly good people, I think.
Well, or maybe even right. Another way to say it is, I think people, whether you're MAGA or Bernie or machine Democrat, and just thinking that the machine is going to serve the people, we want what's best for people, and it's just a difference of how to get there. And so it becomes a question of where does Brian Escal go? He wants to be this bold, passionate. He wants to find his political identity. Is it Javier Milei or is it Bernie Sanders?
Well, Javier Milei is not going to run for president. I wish he would, of the United States. I wish that we didn't have that restriction. I'd vote for him. But no, in all seriousness, I think at the core of everything is that most people don't think critically. And I don't think it's anybody's particular fault. I think that the education system in this country, even when it was conservative, never really taught critical thought. The public schools were originally designed to program worker drones. That was the idea behind public education. And now I make it sound worse than it was, but if you look at the stated reasons for it, it was to prepare people for life in the industrial age, because that's when public education came into place. And so it was to train you to be the worker drone in the factory, because that was the expectation. As it's evolved over the years, we somewhere along the way decided we had allowed teachers to unionize, which was a very bad idea. No public employee should be allowed to unionize, because you shouldn't be allowed to strike a taxpayer. I'm sorry. If you choose you can always teach privately and unionize. I have no issue with the private teachers unionizing, and I would have no issue with any private business unionizing. there is a place for that in organized labor, but not in public employee unions. That's one of the big problems we're facing economically in the country. You cannot allow a public employee to strike the taxpayers. You can't. You can't allow them to hold the taxpayers hostage. And the biggest constituency of the current party in power is the public employees unions, are the public employees unions, I should say. So that's what makes them a member. That is the deep state. Is the bureaucracy. It's not some cabal of guys sitting in a room, and it's not even a conscious. The reason these people all look in the camera and say that we're all nuts who say there's a conspiracy, and I don't believe there's a conspiracy. I think it's an unconscious conspiracy. I think that since every bureaucracy and every culture that's ever existed and exists today has but one goal in mind, and that is to grow. Because the larger it grows, the less chance there is of it being dissolved, and the less chance of the employees of that bureaucracy ever losing their jobs. And the reason that people go to work for government, particularly a federal government in the United States or anywhere else, is because they don't want to really be looked at too hard and they don't want to be fired. Now, mixed into there are a few dedicated employees. I'm not saying there's no such thing, but I worked at the National Security Agency, which is, in movies, they make it seem much more than it really is. But having said all that, well, I knew people in the NSA that were running Amway direct distributing businesses out of their offices. They had so little to do. It's just a gigantic bureaucracy that just grows and metastasizes. And the sick thing is that the average per capita, not per capita, the average income of the average working individual in this country is about $55,000 in the private sector. But in the public sector, if you work for the government, the average is over $100,000. So that's insane that the people who work for us are making twice as much as we are. And that's the enemy, not the billionaires, not all this other crap. We can get into that if you want to. And they're certainly not, I'm not big on crony capitalism either, but I'm just, we've got to start somewhere. Sure. Let's start with the current party in power is a slave to the deep state in the sense that its largest constituents are in order: the public employees union, the teachers unions, and the trial lawyers. Now, when money talks in politics, and they talk bullshit because that's the stuff that their constituents want to hear, and they really don't give a thought about what's going to happen later because they don't think critically. No one thinks. Everyone's playing checkers, not chess, and we need to start playing chess. That's what critical thought is: thinking ahead. If I do this, what will happen as a result of me doing it? And as a result of what happens of me doing it, what will the next thing be? You need to be at least 3 moves out.
And is that really the difference between a progressive and a conservative?
No.
Does it come down to knowledge and naivete?
No, it's not.
The way you said
is a reaction to progressivism. Progressivism has sprung up throughout history all the time. And conservatism, regardless of the country it's in and regardless of the color it's in, is always a reaction to progressivism. Okay, that's the constant war. And when they're in balance, when you don't fuck with the system, pardon my language. Is it okay if I use bad language on this show?
Yeah.
Okay. I've used it before. Why would I change now?
Yeah.
If we don't fuck with the system, okay, if the founders were wise men, okay, and James Madison, who primarily wrote the Constitution, everybody else is really almost irrelevant in that conversation, but for James Madison. When he wrote the Constitution, he was well aware of the dangers of a deep state. Just because they wore wigs and outfits that look funny doesn't mean they weren't just, they look just like you and me sitting here. They took off their wigs. They had the same conversations, maybe, without the technology, but probably deeper, more intellectual. Most of them spoke Greek and read and wrote in Greek. To give you some idea.
Right.
So we, of course, have managed to dismantle every part of that except for the Electoral College. That's the last shred that protects us from tyranny. But that's dangling from the precipice because of the complete absence of critical thought. Nobody thinks what happens if we do, and if we had anyway. That's what I think.
So I hear that, and I've been exposed to a lot of that kind of thinking, as I've been on my journey, and I weigh that against what I grew up with and what I hear from the best to do it from that side, Marianne Williamson. And it's like you get the notion that the left wants to be there for working people. What about that notion?
People have to
That the government, yeah, go ahead.
Look, if history teaches us anything, it's that central planning doesn't work. Not if you do it a little bit, not if you do it a lot. China, as we speak, is going down the drain. I mean, when I say down the drain, I mean down the drain. I mean, any day now, you're going to hear about a revolution in China breaking out. And any day now, you're going to hear about Xi being dragged out of his palace into the streets. That's how bad it is in China. It is disintegrating as we speak. And it's all as a result of central planning. Not communism, central planning. All central planning sucks, okay? Because nobody is smart enough to anticipate the buying and selling decisions of a population of millions or billions of people. Nobody, that's just hubris. You know, I forget who said this, but I'm going to steal a quote, and I think it's Thomas Sowell. I could be wrong, but it says, stupid people can make a lot of mistakes, but it takes brilliant people to really fuck things up. Now, by the way, I'm sorry, he said to create a catastrophe. And that's true. A lot of these intellectuals, people who think they're smart, they so overestimate their own abilities, and it just translates into a desire to rule over others. And they can never be allowed to get in power.
So let me say, at the end of the conversation with Marianne, because of course she presented a general leftist view.
Her economics don't work.
Well, hold on. So we talked about, because she's in like the personal growth space too, you know.
Yeah,
and
I know.
so right. But in a good way, I think, and has helped. And so hold on.
I'm sorry I use that term. You know, I'm a boomer. I say things like that.
I know.
God bless her.
Hold on,
Let
me get my question out.
Okay.
I asked her about self-help and self-accountability and how important that is. And if we just, to what extent do we just need to help, let people fix themselves, and then they don't need the government. But she said explicitly, she goes, no, people need more than personal charity. So what about this notion that, I know you said central planning doesn't work, but is there anything to this notion that the working class has been sold out? Even the MAGA movement says that, right?
No, well, the MAGA movement's wrong too. I'm not a Trump supporter.
And we'll talk about Trump in a moment.
First of all, I kind of like Trump as an individual. Just to make this clear, I think that if I could sit down with Donald Trump and play cards, I'd enjoy it. And I think he's a very interesting guy. And I think he is just as smart as he says he is, although he's a braggart. And if I were him, I wouldn't be so vocal about it. But I think he's very smart.
Right.
And I think that I've watched him. I've become more impressed with him as time has gone on, only because I've watched him sit down for long, long discussions with not necessarily friendly people. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a couple examples. Do you ever watch the All In podcast?
No, but I saw, a few minutes, and I saw that he sat down for just short of
an hour and 20 minutes. He sat with four tech titans.
Right.
Okay.
That was impressive.
Who really know their shit. I mean, know their shit.
Right.
And three of them were hostile.
Right.
Okay. One of them was on his side, David Sachs. One of them was kind of neutral. And the Indian fellow, Premath, I can never say his last name, but he's brilliant. He's one of the, just brilliant.
I see that. Yep.
I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. And please, Indian fellows and friends, I just can't remember it. But, and of course, the finance guy. But anyway, the long story short, David Sachs was a Trump guy all along. But now all four of them love him. And they sat down and talked about it. And they said, he's much different. And the other, have you watched, I know this is going to sound silly. We're talking about politics. Do you ever watch Bryson DeChambeau's YouTube channel where he tries to break 50 on 9 holes with another golfer? Have you ever seen that?
I don't watch anything golf.
Okay, this is great. You really got to make yourself, this is the most watched video in the world right now.
Yes, audience, we will get back to my question, but go.
We're going to go. Donald Trump playing golf with Bryson DeChambeau, the number 1 golfer in the world. Or he's not. Scotty Scheffler is, but he's in the top 5. Great player, okay? And they play golf together. The first thing you'll notice is Trump is not full of shit about his golf game. He's a great golfer. It blew me away. I was shocked. He's such a fatty. I was just so surprised. He's great. He's not just good. He's great, which is a mind blower. Because, when he was shooting the shit with Biden and they were going back and forth, I thought, bullshit. Look how fat you are. But no, I'm wrong. He's actually a great golfer. And secondly, they never talked about politics for an hour and a half of golf. They just shot the shit about it. Was like two guys, and it made me appreciate his humanity. Because I've seen nothing of that from the other side. Zero. From what I understand, she's a total bitch. Right. Now, I could be completely wrong, but if you're a bitch in private, you can't be trusted in public, as far as I'm concerned. That you're just a mean bastard. But I don't really want Trump to win because I know there's a crash coming, and whoever's the president is going to be the next Herbert Hoover. And I positively, since I like Trump more than Harris, I'd like Harris to win because she's going to go down as the disaster that she is, and nobody's going to stop what's coming. So right. I'd rather see Harris win. I know that's convoluted, but that's all.
No, that is interesting. Yeah, so I will circle back to my question about working people and leftist policies and if there's anything to it. But staying on Trump for the moment, you must have seen that I made my announcement that between the two choices, I'm going to vote for Trump. And, I'm not comfortable with it. I won't lie to you. But the reality is that that's where I am. I was really with Kennedy.
Most of the stuff they say about him, when you really look at it in context, here, Trump is an honest liar. That's to understand Trump, you have to understand he's an honest liar. He lies about bullshit that means nothing. Okay, he does it all the time. So he'll go, the biggest crowd ever. I don't do Trump, by the way, but with the hands thing, the biggest crowd ever, the biggest group ever, the greatest accomplishment ever, it's all bullshit. But none of it means a thing. It's just him. He is a showman. He's a very good one, proven that way. It's who he is. However, I've never heard him tell a lie on policy.
Right. It's so interesting because Marianne, who I really, really respect, said that, she has tons of people in her orbit that say, that lean right, that say, Marianne, that's theater, just look at what he does. And she says she can't do that. So it's interesting. I find myself, to distinguish myself from her a little bit, I find myself able to look past his theatrics a little bit. He's not my hero, right? But I respect him. And,
Number one, this is not going to be a close election. I know that everybody thinks it's going to be a squeaker. It's not. She's just managed. What she's doing is trying to pull out the Joe Biden hide me in the basement campaign of the COVID era. And it's not going to work twice. It never worked before in history. It's not going to work now. She's going to have to come out and open her mouth. And the minute that moron opens her mouth, the party's over because she is a moron. She is, first of all, and I'm going to be completely blunt. It is absolutely factual that she was fucking Willie Brownway, was married to someone else, and she was his mistress. And he told many people that she gave great head. I'm just telling you, that's how she became district attorney in San Francisco. There's nobody who knows the situation that will dispute that. Then she's the living example of the promotion of mediocrity should be. Then she runs for attorney general again because Willie Brown puts her up, because at that time he was the political boss of California and he got whatever he wanted in a Democratic state with a 2-to-1 registration advantage. If you, in a Democratic state, you could run a ham sandwich in the Democratic Party and win. It doesn't matter. The Republicans have no chance to hold state office in California anymore. At one time they did when Reagan was alive, but that's gone. So for what it is, so then she becomes attorney general in a state where she couldn't possibly lose. Then she runs for president, and Tulsi Gabbard took her apart like a butcher taking apart a chicken. She's, and that's who's coaching Trump on his debate. I mean, if I were Harris, I'd want notes too, because he is going to take her apart.
Yeah, I'd be very nervous if I was her.
And when that happens, it doesn't matter what the format is. He's just fucking with her now. Okay, I mean, she's trying to change the rules at the last minute to what she already agreed to, because of course her own staff is saying, "Oh God, you can't go in there without notes." There's never been a presidential debate where the candidates had notes, not one. You don't go into a debate with notes.
I'm concerned for her. Let me say that you might be right about all of that. I wouldn't have made such a crude, and I wouldn't have gone as far as you went. And let me just say,
90% of her staff has quit.
No, I hear you.
Over the time of her term.
We all enjoy sexual activities to the extent that we can.
Talking about the blowjob? Well,
yeah,
it's well known.
I understand. And look, that's about the least important thing we can criticize her for, though. I understand that it's part
of your nose or shooting me the bird. I was just curious.
No, wiping my nose. It's relevant. It's relevant in the context of your argument and the argument being made against her, and I buy that. But I want to give her a little grace. We all.
Okay, so I'll explain it this way: A people hire A people, and B people hire C people. That's an old executive. I'm sure you learned that in college. That's like a very basic.
No. Oh fuck no! I didn't study any business.
If you took business, they would have taught you that.
Why, do you think I took business, Herb?
I guess not. But business 101 is A people hire A people, but B people hire C people. So what that means in English is excellent people who are secure in themselves surround themselves with excellent people because they're not threatened by the other people's accomplishments. Their ego can take it. And so they're always the best executives. Mm-hmm. However, most executives aren't A people, they're B people. So they surround themselves with people who are just a notch lower because it makes them feel better about themselves because they're human beings and most human beings are insecure. Well, just so you don't think I'm being partisan, I'm going to start with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, for all of his flaws, is an A person. Okay. Now, how do I know that? Because I looked at his cabinet and he surrounded himself with the best Democrats in the country at the time, every last one of them. And he being a Oxford man, an Ivy League man, a Rhodes Scholar, clearly a genius IQ. Yes, he's a lowlife. Yes, he probably raped Juanita Broad. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. The personal judgments will leave to someone else. But just as in terms of executive ability, there's a reason why he was the last successful president. Okay, the last successful president is Bill Clinton.
Go on.
Okay, but George Bush was also an A person, interestingly enough, except he was a slave of the. He had a great cabinet. I mean, even to make Dick Cheney your vice president, though he is the Prince of Darkness, he is not a B person. He's a big personality. To put yourself next to him, you would have to be very secure in yourself. And from everything I've read from people on the inside of that administration, Bush was definitely in charge. Now, having said that, I realize Democrats say differently, but if you read the memoirs, the people who were actually involved, and you see what they said later, he was in charge. There's no doubt about it. However, Barack Obama is a B person. He's very thin-skinned. He's thin-skinned to this day. Okay. And so he hired Biden to be his vice president because Biden was never anything. He spent 50 years in the Senate and put forth no major legislation and he's just everybody's buddy. Good old Joe. He's a C guy. But we had somehow elected him president by God only knows how. So he hired a D person because you can clearly see that Joe Biden can't take it. He's got an ego that's very, very fragile. Come on. I mean, be objective. Look how long he held on to this job when he should have never, ever.
Undeniable.
And by the way, she was the queen of the cover-up. For 3.5 years, she's been covering up for him. I mean, how people don't understand that the 3.5-year lie. But anyway, she's a
You almost have to feel for her because, what are you supposed to do? Quit? Resign?
She's a
maybe.
She has no ability. She's never gotten a presidential vote. She's never had a candidate. She didn't go through the primaries. Her vice presidential candidate is not vetted. It's going to be a shitstorm of discovery on this guy. He is a real piece of work if you look at his background. It's just astounding to me how the major party executed a coup d'etat and installed a candidate without a single vote and are defending democracy. I love that argument.
Even if you give it the benefit of the doubt, which is hard to do. But when you do that, you just go, wow. Easy to understand why people would be uncomfortable and leaning, in this case, towards Trump, all things considered. And that's where I am.
When they pushed Nixon out, there was a reason. Okay, Nixon was going down. The impeachment was happening. It was either leave or be impeached. The first impeached and removed president, and only in history at that, even to now. So he left. That's not what went on with Joe. Joe Biden didn't want to go. Now, I don't think he should have ever. The Democrats, let me tell you this is a good example of how critical thought never took place in the mind of the guy behind all of this, who's Barack Obama. And this is not, by the way, not that I don't think it was an absence of any critical thought. Barack Obama serves 8 years of his nothing presidency that we're living with the legacy of. I'd like to point out only that between the founding of the republic and Barack Obama, the national debt never got to $1 trillion. Thank you very much. Now, since after him, it just went apeshit. Obamacare destroyed what was left of any budget. But anyway, so I don't want to get into, I'm getting off track. So Obama gets in office, he serves 8 years. And instead of allowing his vice president to run, who wanted to run and wanted to be a candidate and wanted to be the president,
right?
He pushed him aside and told him, "You're not running. This is why Biden actually hates
I know
Obama.
this is a fascinating story. And was it because he said you're too fragile from Bo? You can't, you're not in the right mind to do it. Step aside.
It was two things. The first is, the famous quote about Joe Biden that Obama said, and he's never denied, which is, you can never underestimate the ability of Joe to fuck things up.
Right.
So that was number one. Joe was a joke even then. And secondly, Hillary seemed like the obvious choice. It was his legacy was going to be to leave the first woman president, and he was setting up the table. But he never thought that for a moment how much people hated her and still hate her. She's probably the most despised person in American politics if you looked at the broad populace. And she would have been the only person who could have possibly lost to Donald Trump.
Why do I like her? Should I not like her at this point? Respect her?
Is she an A? I'm sorry, I don't use that word a lot.
Hold on, is she an A cunt?
No.
Is she an A person?
No, her husband's an A. She's a B. She's an insecure bitch B.
Fair enough.
She doesn't have a sincere bone in her body. She's a sociopath.
But does she? But does she believe in the right things?
She's a sociopath. She believes only in her own intellect and her own ability and her own destiny. Period.
Prove Donald Trump.
No.
I know you're not a Trump guy.
He's not a sociopath. And by the way, he would have never been president. Let me continue on. This is how Obama fucked this up. Obama elected Donald Trump. Okay. He manipulated the system. He thwarted the democratic process. Biden would have been the choice. Biden would have won. And today we'd be at the end of the second Biden term, and none of this bullshit would have happened. None of the Trump shit would have happened, and it would have been a whole different story. This is all because Barack Obama had to fuck around and not learning a thing from that, not learning anything. Okay, they fixed the system for Biden this time. Now everybody knew he was senile, and there was one brave Democrat out of Minnesota, the Jewish guy, I can't think of his name.
Dean Phillips.
Dean Phillips, thank you very much. One guy brave enough in that whole party to say someone's got to run against them, but they even moved the New Hampshire primary to second to fix the system so that South Carolina, where the fix was in with the congressman, I can't think of his name, but Biden has a nest there that he's not. Anyway, they fixed the system. They shut out any possible candidate. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, now they commit a coup d'etat because clearly the guy can't. He should be removed right now under the 25th Amendment. It is, I think, the greatest source of fear for me that we have this idiot in place in a time of two major wars. Either of one could go nuclear at any moment.
I'm not trying to support the name calling, but in fairness, you think he's an idiot who has dementia. That's what you think.
Yes, I think he's an idiot who has dementia. He's an idiot to begin with. Now, because if you look back into his foreign policy decisions, which is supposed to be his forte for his entire term, if you look back historically and everything he's ever said, he was wrong 100% of the time. 100% of the time. He's never been correct about as Barack Obama, I'll agree with him. You can never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to fuck it up. What we're living with now, a $35 trillion national debt, with it growing at the rate of $1 trillion every 100 days, is entirely because of this idiot. And we are in a really bad spot. And
let me ask you this: what do you think would have happened had Barack not intervened, according to your, buying into your narrative, and Joe was elected? We're at the end of his second term. How do you think the economy would be? How do you think the world?
Probably Mitt Romney would have beat him. The truth is, it wouldn't be. We'd be finishing the first term of Mitt Romney and going into the second. Who, by the way, the great tragedy of the 21st century is Mitt Romney not becoming president. Sorry, I know a lot of Republicans their heads are going to explode when I say that. Never was a man more qualified. And never was a man less a sociopath than Mitt Romney. And somehow we elected the phony over the real thing again. It's a mind boggler to me. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that is interesting.
But Mitt Romney would have wiped up the ground with Joe Biden. Because the one thing I'll say about Barack Obama is he's a gifted politician, which has nothing to do with his talent as a human being or his worth, but he's a great teleprompter reader, the best I've ever seen. And he's got that whole cool thing going on. Okay, but Biden has none of that. And Romney would have wiped up the ground with him, and we'd be sitting at the end of his first term looking at the second. And a lot of what's happened would have never happened, including the egregious COVID shitstorm. But anyway.
Had Biden been allowed to run, well, I guess I have my time.
He would have won in 2016.
Against Trump.
Yeah.
And then you think Romney would have beaten Biden in 2020?
Oh, yeah.
That's what you're saying. Okay. Got
Oh
it.
yeah, right. Romney would have wiped up the ground with Biden.
I see. So
Because
Biden would have been what Biden would have been a one-termer.
Because Obama played the phony race card on poor Romney. That's what he did. He just.
I don't remember that. I just remember the bayonets.
I just not going to go there. It was a hit job, but that would have not. It wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have even tried it against Romney because Biden doesn't have that street cred. So Romney would have kicked the shit out of him, and then he would have had a successful presidency, and COVID would have been handled much differently. And a lot of the problems we're dealing with now would have never taken place. And it's all because Barack Obama had to fuck with it. And what's amazing to me is the Democratic Party learned nothing. They're still fucking. I'll say this for the Republicans. They hold real primaries. Even this year, Trump had to put down all Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. And remember, early on, no one was sure he was going to get nominated. He had to go through it like a real Democrat. And I mean small d, not big D.
Right.
And, you know,
that's where I am. It's people criticize me. They go, "You're gonna harp about process when Donald Trump is the threat that he is." Sorry, process means something to me.
Donald Trump left office. I mean, I don't know what these guys are talking about. He left office. He bitched and moaned about it. And I'm going to tell you something. Prefacing that it was a legal election. Legal and decent are two completely different things. And when you mail out millions and millions of unsolicited absentee ballots and you allow them to be collected in collection boxes, unverified, and count them, there's no way Trump really lost that election. No fucking way. Okay? No fucking way. Now, did he lose legally? Absolutely. Does he ever, and if I were him, I'd drop this, by the way. I'm just saying this in the context of our conversation, but if I were in his shoes, I'd stop talking about it. It's definitely a tired subject. But the truth of the matter is he was fucked out of his second term, and then we beat it. And that was another. So it's just.
I buy that, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's any necessary. I mean, there's always a little bit, but no, I think they're generally right. There's no big, secret cabal of fixers, but I think that they set it up for fraud, and there was no other way it could have worked that way.
Yeah. So switching gears here a little bit. I mentioned you heard because you watched my interview with Marianne, but did you hear when I mentioned to her that I told, hey, I know a guy who promotes a lottery system, and she was intrigued. She was, deep thinkers really are intrigued by that. But then she said, but I wouldn't want to change the Constitution to make that happen. But you believe in it. Oh, you wouldn't.
I would restore the Constitution to all of its original provisions with the exception of how representatives are chosen. That's it. I'm a strict constitutionalist. I think the Constitution is a sacred document, and I don't think you fuck with sacred documents. And so, there's a reason the First Amendment is the first of the amendments. This whole discussion on hate speech and inaccurate and all that nonsense, it's the First Amendment for a reason. First Amendment. There's an absolute protection of free speech, period. I don't care if you're a neo-Nazi, okay? And you have to be able to say whatever bullshit you want to say in a free country, because the minute you get into the arbitration of what is not acceptable, you invite tyranny. And
obviously you can't do so. Lines get drawn inevitably. Even if you were to say, I believe in absolute free speech, you can't. Speech can be harassment as well. So speech can be conduct.
No, there's laws against harassment, and there's a lot of precedent, and there's a lot of judicial precedent on harassment. You can get restraining orders, you can get libel judgments, you can get slander judgments. There's lots of ways for you to remedy being harassed.
I see.
Okay. But the government has no place telling anybody what is or is not harassment. That's not the legislative or executive branch. That's why they set up the judicial branch. That's what it's for. So that if you have a case like that, you can bring it to a jury of your peers or a judge if you choose, and let someone who's completely disinterested make a choice. And most judges, in my experience, in my many decades of experience, are generally trying to be good. And most of them are generally not political. There are exceptions, but generally most superior court judges who are the first ones to hear this kind of stuff, they're mostly good people trying to do a good job, and they're very respectable.
That's something to chew on, the idea that when the legislator takes that responsibility from the jury. It's taking, you could say it's taking power from the people.
Look, and the Constitution is designed to allow the states to regulate any regulation like that there is because of community standards. And the community standards in Mississippi are different than the community standards in Oregon. I'm sorry, it's each star. And why do the people in Oregon give a rat's ass what the people in Mississippi do, and vice versa? And why do we have a one size fits all? Well, going back to your question on the welfare state and what do we owe the workers and so on and so forth. Well, look, in a Radical Reset, the book I wrote on anti-politism, available on Amazon right now, and just look under Herby Kay, A Radical Reset, you'll find it. Okay. Having said that, what was I talking about just a second ago?
The workers. Getting back to the workers.
Oh yeah, the welfare state. I was going to say, I don't talk about, most of the book are proposed alternatives to what we're doing now governmentally that would never be possible except in an anti-political state. And the last chapter is about the system itself. And that's because although every solution I present would actually work, they'll never happen in a political environment because it cannot be efficient. It simply cannot. But having said that, if the people still choose to have some sort of safety net, I have no problem with that. It should just be done at the state level. And there's two reasons for that. The first is it's much more answerable to its own people. Okay, for example, if I want to go bitch at the governor of Arizona, I literally know where she lives. Okay, and she goes out to eat like everybody else, and you see her around Phoenix from time to time, and I'm neither up pro or con on her. She's fine. I mean, she's kind of neutral. We have a Democrat governor and a Republican legislature, so they really don't hurt. They kind of cancel each other out, which is fine. But the point is, she's accessible. She's not like the president off in the mountains, somewhere. And the legislature, people who run for state legislatures don't do it for power. Because who gives a shit who the state senator and the state rep is?
Hey, Brian, you want to host the state senator? Oh, fuck, no.
But most of them do it because they give a rat's ass about their own communities, right?
Right.
So you get, and they live, your state senator is your next door neighbor. Your state representative is the neighbor on the other side. And so the point is they're much more answerable to their constituents. So when they do make a mistake, changes can be made much quicker. And party politics have very little, at the state level, they're not nearly as important in most states. For example, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who was passed over, by the way, he wasn't passed over because he was a Jew. He was passed over because he's an A.
Yeah, either that or he declined because...
he declined because it would have fucked up his life.
Right.
He's going to be the first Jewish president. Sure as God made little green apples. I'm just telling you. This guy has it. He has it, whatever it is. But what's interesting in his government of Pennsylvania is he's much more moderate in real life, for real. He's a very good governor. Just like Governor Polis in Colorado is a very good governor. And what I'm saying is, at the state level, party means much, much, much less. Mm-hmm. So it's better. They can design welfare programs that fit the demographics of their state and the populations of their state, right? So, the people in Minnesota can design one for people in Minnesota, and the people in Florida can design one or they can choose not to design one at all and see how it goes. But what you basically will have is 50 laboratories all trying different things, and other states can copy them. So instead of one size fits all, we have 50 laboratories experimenting with different ways to deliver services. And, I'm the first to say I don't know everything about everything. And one of them is going to come up with some original working solutions. This is the first reason. The second reason is states can't print money. So they can't do the bullshit that our federal government has just done to us by placing us in a position ultimately where we're going to have to default on the debt. Since states can't print money, they're not nearly as dangerous. So when they make a mistake, they have to raise taxes, and that makes the taxpayers angry, and that immediately gets rid of that government and makes the change happen. So because nobody likes too many taxes for too little things. The federal government needs to be involved in national defense, foreign policy, and that's about it. Chasing down interstate criminals. Everything else that they do should be devolved to the states. Everything.
It's an attractive argument. I think the counter argument, the reply would be, but that would leave people who are legitimate victims of economic injustice throughout the United States in different positions, and it wouldn't be fair. What about that?
Prefacing that, I make a major exception for people who cannot help themselves. Okay, so for the mentally disabled, the physically disabled, I want to make clear I am not a heartless individual for what I'm about to say. Okay, everybody else, you're poor because you make shitty decisions, period. Poverty is the result of shitty decisions. And the only way you learn not to make a shitty decision, I speak from experience.
It resonates with me.
Right. You must have consequence. What social programs try to do is eliminate consequence for shitty decisions and create chaos. You want to know why the black nuclear family is the disaster and 80% of black children are born into single parent families? It's the welfare state. Because out of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. With the best of intentions, we tried to help the black population and we fucked them up beyond recognition. And the only way to put that genie back in the bottle is not to, in my opinion, but again, the states can do what they want. In my book, I'm very clear about this. This is a personal opinion. I would do nothing at all. I think people will, except obviously, but I would tell you that in the 19th century, before the welfare state, there was much more charity in the United States, and the disabled were well taken care of. I know that runs contrary to the public narrative, but it's true. Again, if you don't believe bullshit and you actually do the research, you'll find out that private charity will probably pick up all that anyway. We won't have to raise anybody's taxes. But let's say that you think you need to help people. Let me ask you this, and this is, for example, let me use a clear example. I'm often asked, because I oppose the Federal Reserve, what would I replace it with? And my answer is simple. You don't replace a cancer after you cut it out. You don't replace it with anything. The welfare state is a cancer. What do you replace it with? Nothing. It's proven to be a disaster. It's not only does it not work, it hasn't worked anywhere it's been tried. Now, as soon as I say that, I'm going to hear the Scandinavian argument, okay? Right away. Okay, and so I'd like to address that quickly. The largest country in Scandinavia is Sweden by population. They have about 9 million people. That's the population of Los Angeles. Okay? Sweden kind of looks like me before I was, now. They're all light skin, light haired. I mean, I'm gray, but we're talking blonde haired, blue eyed people. They're Swedes. Now, it's much easier to design a social welfare system when everybody is the same demographic. Okay? Which is another argument for state-run welfare, because you can target the demographic of your state based on your population and your makeup. And anyone who believes that people don't behave differently of different cultures is being willfully stupid. Okay, different people. Scandinavians have a particular culture that blends really well. But what people don't ever understand also about the Scandinavian welfare state is that the beginning tax rate on the middle class begins at 56%. Okay, begins at 56%. The lowest wage earner in Sweden pays 56% income tax, and they pay a 25% value-added tax on everything they buy. So imagine that every sandwich you bought in a store, for like you went to McDonald's, is instantly 25% more because of the value. No matter what the price goes to, it'll always be 25% too high. Now, the reason they pay that is because their welfare state, for their tiny population of Swedes, delivers the benefit. Okay, that's also true of Denmark. That's also true of Norway. You can't. And by the way, they're much more capitalistic than we are. And how they balance that is they ditched socialism in the early 1980s because it doesn't work. They privatized all the public industries, and we're ranked right now 15th most free economy in the world. Sweden is 9.
So you can do a free market with a strong social safety.
Sure, as long as you pay for it. Look, we have to pay for it, and we're going to get a chance very soon to start over. Okay, we can't fix the mess we're in. I'm not even going to get into how to fix the mess we're in. It can't be done. It's way past the point of no return. It's just a question of when, not if. There's going to be some event that's going to happen that none of us will anticipate, because no one anticipates unanticipated events. Yet history is peppered with unanticipated events, and everyone always has surprised. I'm never surprised by an unexpected event because it's unexpected. I know there's going to be an unexpected event.
Right.
There's going to be some global shitstorm that's going to take place. Maybe the Ukrainians will push Putin too far and he'll launch a nuke on Kyiv, which I think is possible. Idiots that we are, arming the Ukrainians to invade Russia. Fucking stupid. But I'm not going down that rat hole. In the Middle East, the Israelis are absolutely, I think if you've read anything I've written, you know that I said from the very start, Israel's going to attack north and then go at Iran.
Yeah.
And that they were going to use October 7th as as a not an excuse, that's the wrong word, but as a justification for doing it.
Yeah.
They're never going to tolerate their answer is going to be, we're not, and they're already saying it, we're not going to tolerate all those missiles for Hezbollah. And when they blew up the plant in Yemen, that was a message to Iran that says, we can hit a target farther away than you are and blow it the fuck up. Then they murdered that guy in downtown Tehran, which told the Iranians, and this is why they haven't retaliated, by the way, because this is an Israeli message. We know where you are, we know where you sleep, and we can get at you.
Right.
And Israel has no qualms about decapitating regimes. Okay. They practice state assassination. They make no bones about it. Israel is going to decapitate the Iranian regime in the end. And it's going to happen without warning. They're not going to ask our permission. And they're going to do it because the Saudis are secretly their allies. It's really not much of a secret anymore, but the Saudis and the Bahrainis and the UAE and Tunisia and Libya and Egypt, they all want to be done with the Iranians. They're all Sunni Arabs, and they want to be done with the crazy Shiites from their point of view. I'm not saying they are or they aren't. The Shiites and the Sunnis make the Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland look like a love fest. Okay, they hate each other with a special hatred that I don't think the Americans appreciate. And the Saudis, since America is withdrawing from the Middle East, if Trump's elected, he's a very good friend of Israel, but he's going to take the American presence out of the Middle East because he's right. We shouldn't be involved in that. We don't understand it. We shouldn't be involved in it. Having said that, the Saudis and all those, they need a guarantor of their security. And Israel is that logical country because they have a nuclear force. Everyone knows it. So if Israel extends its nuclear umbrella over Saudi Arabia doesn't have to develop its own nuclear weapons, which it doesn't really want to do. It's expensive and it makes you a target. They don't want any part of it, but they're happy to be under Israel's protection. And as soon as Trump's elected and we stop kicking them in their teeth, they'll make buddy friends. It'll be all love and they'll join the Abraham Accords and it'll all become unity. Anyway, but the Israelis are going to decapitate the Iranian regime. Now, that could go one of two ways. They're gambling that the Iranian people hate the regime so badly that they'll rise up in the street and whatever takes its place can't be worse than what it is. And I generally think that's probably correct. It'll probably be a military junta. It'll probably be somebody who's, immediately denounces all that mullah shit and opens it up. That would be, or it's possible that the Shah could come back, the son, Reza Shah. That's possible. In a constitutional monarchy, that would be actually ideal.
All right, thank you for that, Herb. So the Shah might return.
The Shah might return. By the way, I feel like I'm dominating group dynamics in this discussion.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Don't think that.
I feel like my daughter Chloe behind me going, Daddy, you're dominating group dynamics.
No, not a problem. No, you're dominating the conversation, but not in an unhealthy way.
Okay.
Oftentimes I appreciate.
Feel free to jump in anywhere and shut me up. I mean, I'm like,
No, I want to hear your thoughts, and ultimately we're doing what I want to do with you, which is keep pushing this progressive. I want to be a good person, Herb. Help me out here. So is it really so easy that I can abandon this progressivism and just let people fend for themselves? But I'm wrestling, so I want your guidance. But tell me the story.
Sentence you just said, let people fend for themselves. It's not up to you to let people do anything. It's not up to anybody to let people do anything.
Right.
Except think of how brainwashed we are. And it's not just you.
Go ahead.
Okay. We all think we have to do something. Why? Where's that written? And I'm not saying, look, if you want to do something, quote unquote, and you have like a religious conviction or just as a human being, by all means do it. But I'm telling you that Bill Gates has done more good for the world than Mother Teresa ever did. Ever. Just think of the economic benefit that he created. I mean, just think of the hundreds of thousands of jobs just as a result of Microsoft existing and all the lives that are supported, all the homes, all the kids, all the schools. I mean,
why does he get such a bad rap?
Because people think that I'll use Mother Teresa as my evil example. And I think she was a phony. Mother Teresa ran a hospice in the middle of the worst slum in the world and never once did a single thing to alleviate the suffering and opposed abortion. And look, in India, you got to think about it. I mean, it's a different situation. I don't want to get into the domestic abortion argument, but look, this woman opposed birth control. Okay, forget abortion. She opposed birth control. in this hospice in the middle of this Indian slum, and she never did anything to reduce the poverty, and she was a phony, and she helped nobody but herself. In the end, by helping yourself, you help more people. Think about it. If you just live your life for yourself, okay, and do what's best for you, and when I say yourself, your family unit, okay, if you do it, because the family is the core of everything. If you take family first, and your every decision as the head of family, whether you're the man or the woman or a team, whatever it is, I'm not here to make judgments about that. But if you make your every decision based on that, you help more people because you save better, so you create capital for investment, you buy smarter, so you create jobs through production and distribution and the middlemen. This is why, by the way, both of these candidates have their head up their ass on immigration, but that's a digression. It's
well, Trump has said we want lots of people in. Well, anyway, let's not get sidetracked. But this idea then, so what about this idea that from the left, that corporations in America have screwed over the American people and that the government is required to alleviate that injustice, to remedy that injustice?
I'm glad progressives exist, okay, because conservatives can get out of hand too. They both exist when they're in balance to counter each other. All right. So look, you don't want the conservatives in charge running the whole show either, because they have a certain problem. Both sides have a problem with moral superiority. They just come from a different place. Their superiority comes from their intellect, where the conservatives, their superiority comes from their faith, which can be very dangerous when not mitigated. So I really think that both sides have a place. And while I think the economic policies of progressivism are complete nonsense, and I don't believe in the welfare state, I have no problem when they're acting as genuine progressives, and they champion free speech and they champion the little guy. But see, we're using the term progressive about a party that's become essentially a communist party. And
that's fair.
No, in fact, I'll take that back. They're a fascist party. And I hate to use that word because it's so overused. But the definition of fascism, okay, is a centrally controlled state where private business is allowed to maintain the facade of being private, but is in collusion with the state.
You sound like Marianne Williamson.
Well, she's right.
Right.
But you have to understand that the left they're the fascists. I mean, they're attacking the conservatives here are not the fascists. The left is the fascists, along with anyone who supports the military-industrial complex. Because, look, guys.
So it's a uniparty, you're saying, but it's a uniparty in fairness.
That's why, yeah, it is. And you know what your identity should be? Non-affiliated. That's what your identity should be. And look.
Well, but hold on. Let me ask you this: if the idea is that our political process is owned by this corporate, if Marianne's right, if the progressives are right about the diagnosis, maybe not the treatment. The question is, what's the treatment?
Wait, I just want to stop you right there. What she thinks is it's the corporations corrupting the state, when in fact it's the state corrupting the corporations. And I'll use a quick example. Ford Motor is going down the drain as we speak over producing EVs that they were forced to produce by the Biden administration. And in no logical world would any auto company have ever gone into the EV business except through government coercion. Okay, period. Because EVs never made a fucking bit of sense from the beginning, and they're collapsing as we speak. And I'm not saying there's not. I'm like Trump. There's a place for them, but coercion. By the way, there's not one example in history of a government ever creating a market for anything. That's not what governments do. Right. Okay, so they predictably fail. You also know, because you've known me a long time, I told you from the beginning that this was going to be a disaster. Okay, because you can't create a market. It doesn't. You can't. No one's that smart. This is just hubris. People should live their lives for themselves.
Right.
And if you're poor and able-bodied, you're a fuck up. And in society, stigmas have a reason. There's a reason for stigma. We've pretended like we're going to hurt some people so badly. Oh my God, we might hurt their feelings. Okay, when you're a schmuck, and I have been a schmuck. Okay, I want to make this clear. Horrible mistakes. I speak from experience, but you need to be called on it, and you need to suffer the consequences of it. And pretending that poverty is something to celebrate and to protect the feelings of the poor, they're fuck ups. They fucked up their lives. They're fucking up their children's lives. And the only way they're going to unfuck it is if we stop coddling them in any way, unless they're disabled. But
so you really do believe the vast majority of poor people
they'll figure it out. You know what they'll do?
Yeah.
They'll get married, because that's what happens. If you look to our south in Mexico, okay, you'll notice that there's very little welfare state in Mexico, because they don't collect taxes for shit. They can name any tax they want in Mexico. They're not going to collect it. So, but Mexico has not yet. Listen, I lived and worked in Mexico. That's a long discussion for un otro día. Okay, but the point I'm making is when you go into a Mexican restaurant, and I don't mean a Mexican restaurant like here, I mean a restaurant in Mexico. I don't seafood restaurant, and you go in and they're playing music. Everybody knows the music, from the littlest kid to the grandpa. There's a restaurant near Hermosillo, Sonora, which is the capital of the state. And I used to go there a lot on business, and it's called Mariachisimo. And they have a big stage, and on the stage, it's actually a steakhouse, because Sonora is famous for its steak. But I digress. I'm just trying to give an ad for Sonora. Sonora's a great steak. But anyway, at Mariachisimo, they have this huge mariachi band. Now, this isn't like three guys singing "ay ay ay ay." Okay, this is like 21 people on a stage with a variety, like an orchestra of mariachi, and they play mariachi songs that you as a gringo have never heard, because they don't play, I don't know. Give me a typical song that some asshole would ask for in a Mexican restaurant. I don't even do it.
Who knows?
Wait, Guantanamera or something, some bullshit like that. They don't do that stuff. Okay. But the point is, everybody, and you know why grandma and grandpa and all the little kids and everyone in between know the words? Because they live together. Because you're expected to take care of your old people and your young people in this culture. That's why they stay together so close. What happens to old Mexicans? They go live with their eldest daughter. That's the tradition. And she knows that from the day she's born. And if there's no eldest daughter, it's going to be the son. Okay. But the parent, it is not a question of whether a Mexican family is going to take care of the old people.
Right.
And they live together. That's what we had before the welfare state. What did we have before we didn't have people living in the street. That's a fantasy of shitty movies. Okay. We had families taking care of their own old people. We fixed what wasn't broken. The family is the only thing that can support and provide security to an individual reliably. Because when the shit hits the fan, the only real friends you have are the ones you're related to. Let's be honest. Okay. Maybe.
And so of course the question goes to, if I buy your argument, which it always sounds good, honestly, and reasonable.
Because I'm right. But
so what about the exceptions when someone doesn't have family? The family dies before they do, and so forth. And their friends, they got no friends.
Well, that's why in the old days they had aid associations and churches. Okay, so number one, the majority of aid was delivered by churches, as it should be. Churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever it might be. The religious people in the old days, the founders of this country, if you read their private writings, were mostly atheists. Okay, they mostly didn't believe it. George Washington didn't really believe it. Thomas Jefferson didn't really believe it. Ben Franklin definitely didn't believe it. Adams sort of believed it, sort of didn't. But in public, they all called themselves deists. Okay, they didn't identify. And the one that was religious was James Madison, who wrote the Constitution. Interestingly enough, he was an Anglican. But history is a lot. These guys don't shit marble, man. They're like real people. Do you know that James Madison was like 5'1"? He was like a little midget guy. Right. Anyway, amazing. A giant of history, 5'1".
Right.
But
religion, churches.
Religion. That you can look. I'm Jewish. You're Jewish, right? Do you really believe it? Come on, tell me the truth. Do you really believe in invisible friends for sure?
No, not for sure. I wouldn't say that I believe in anything for sure at this point.
I'm 67, so I think more about my mortality than you do, and I'm gonna tell you that I really doubt it. I mean, maybe. And so that's why I'm not an atheist, because atheists are such assholes. They always try to tell everybody else they're wrong, right? My attitude is, I don't think so. But the point is, I still belong to a synagogue. Okay? It doesn't kill me to participate in my community. Okay? My kids
it helps you.
Right. My kids went to Hebrew school. You know? Right. It didn't hurt them. It provided a foundation. Now, look, all of us are agnostic, the whole family. I would never lie to my kids. If they asked me if I believed in God, I would say, Not likely. And they would say, well, why are we going to Hebrew school? And I said, because as you grew older, you're going to appreciate the benefit of being part of the Jewish community. That's how I sold that. And today they all thank me for it.
Yeah.
Every last one of them.
Right.
And they're all half Jewish, by the way, but they've all gone to Israel and they've all made the Aliyah and they've all done the whole shtick. Okay. And none of them believe in God in a literal sense. The point I'm making is you don't have to. And over the years, I've known lots of Christians who don't really believe it either. But I know one, Otto Olson, I'll use his name, may he rest in peace, one of my heroes, a wonderful man, Lutheran, president of his church, member, the whole 9 yards. And one day, we were really good friends, and this was towards the end of his life, and I asked him, do you really believe in God? He said, no. He said, but, the church provided so much benefit to my family and my community. I mean, what's wrong with going to the Lutheran church? Is it going to kill you to go on Sunday? It was, I'm so busy. I can't.
Yeah.
Look, we've lost we've placed into the government things that were best left in the private
locally,
sector.
whether it's at church or in the home or in the community.
For the non-religious in the old days, okay, before you say, what do you do for the guy that just will not walk into a church or synagogue or mosque? Okay, fine. That's why they formed aid associations. And look it up. There were tons of them. And people would pay in a little bit of, it was like tithing for the Mormons. It was like buying social insurance for yourself if things turned to shit. And you could self-insure that. Private people will do a better job always of everything. There is nothing that can be done better by the government. My God, if we had a mercenary army, it would be 10 times better than the one we have. I'm sorry.
People will say, well, then why don't they do that now? Why hasn't the private sector picked it up?
They're not allowed. The government is a monopoly that doesn't permit competition and has guns and has the power to both kill you legally and imprison you legally. So there's no resisting them.
Yeah, but if I wanted to press, I could say, well, look, I mean, we have problems. Why are they not remedied by private institutions? I get that government is coercive.
Because the government has co-opted it. Because politicians figured out, first of all, they could spend other people's money really great. Okay, and the goal of every politician, but for a teeny minority, is getting reelected. Period. End of story. That's why they can all lie so convincingly. And I mean all. I'm not pointing to one side or the other. So, look, they're going to do whatever it takes to get reelected. So they're never going to do the smart thing. The smart thing is never the easy way. And the easy way is always the popular way in the short time. So they're going to give people what they want, something for nothing with other people's money. And it sounds great. And all this time, baby, we are borrowing over 50% of our budget right now. Right now.
That's why you crafted antipolitism.
It's too late to stop this. There's no stopping it. And Trump, by the way, is not running on when he's asked about Social Security, the biggest problem by far. And I'm a recipient, by the way, but I'm not an infant. I'm not an imbecile. I can do math. I accept. I'm an objectivist. There's an objective reality, and the objective reality is Social Security has to be reformed severely. Okay, and starting with means testing. Otherwise, in 2030, my friends, those of you taking Social Security and whose heads are exploding, in 2030, we're all going to get a 25% benefit cut minimum. Okay, we've got to deal with this now, and the best way to deal with it is look. Anyway, I don't want to go there. It needs to be reformed, but neither one of them are talking about it. Trump's not the right guy for this. He's not a cutter. He didn't cut a nickel when he was president. Right. Okay. Now he didn't spend like Biden. I guess he spent more technically, but that was COVID. And that is a historic anomaly. You take COVID out and Trump didn't spend anywhere near like Biden has. He's not even in the same ballpark. Okay. But he still spent too fucking much money. And the myth that you can tax cut your way and grow your way out of the deficit is a myth. Okay, that's not true. Let me encapsulate this and why Joe Biden is the worst president in American history all at the same time. He weaponized the dollar. Okay, he did something that no other president has ever done, Democrat or Republican. In 1948, in the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States promised the world that we would never, ever, ever weaponize the dollar. Even we promised the Soviets that. We promised the communists that. If they agreed to use the dollar as their reserve currency, which helped stabilize the world at the time, the trade-off was we would back it with gold and silver in Fort Knox, which we abrogated that in 1971, fuck Richard Nixon. And then he ever made. It pales. Watergate pales in comparison to that. Then, because we wouldn't have inflation today, but for that. Then, but see, you can't spend money without anything behind it if you have to back it by gold.
He's such a smart guy. Why would he do that, Nixon? He seems like such a smart guy.
Because he was a Keynesian, and in those days they believed that bullshit. They believed that you could. They basically, his thought was the United States as the reserve currency of the world would be unaffected by this, and this did turn out to be true. In fact, Nixon tried wage and price controls. He was the last idiot to try it until Kamala Harris just brought it up. What a fucking idiot! She is such an idiot. Anyway, but yada yada yada. We go through the whole Cold War. We fight the Soviets. We win the Cold War. The whole thing. Yep. Here we are, and Russia invades Ukraine. And what does Joe Biden do? He immediately weaponizes the dollar.
Right. I've heard that. I've heard people say that.
Yeah. Well, that was it. That's what created BRICS. The minute he did it, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia. Most importantly, Saudi Arabia. Okay, because the only thing holding this whole thing together for us now is the thin thread of the petrodollar. Okay, so all of you renewable energy people, shut the fuck up. The only thing that's holding this thing on is the fact that all oil in the world has been traded in dollars, and that's already come to an end. And our guys go glibly, they can never replace the dollar. That's what Britain said about the pound in the 1900s when they were in the same position we're in now. The global hegemon. They did exactly what we're doing. They got so smug about the pound sterling, which was, by the way, truly the pound sterling. But what did they do? They detached it, and then they inflated it, and they thought the exact same stupid fucking thing that we're doing now. It's not like there isn't a historic example. We're just following it. And we're going to come to a point very soon where the politicians are going to have to make a choice. The next president's going to have to make this choice in the Congress. And the choice is, do we continue to inflate or do we default on the debt? That's going to be the choice. In the end, that's going to be, there's no other way out of this. Okay. Choice A that they will take, because it's the easy choice, will be to inflate the currency, to go the way of Venezuela and Argentina. And we will go exactly that way. That's our real future. Okay. The right choice would be to default on the debt, which is what we're going to ultimately have to do in the end. So after we stupidly go into a hyperinflation, we're going to have to at some point pull the plug on that and default, which will cause a global default, which will cause a global political upheaval, and we'll be lucky to survive it.
Right. And that's going to really get ugly.
That's why the survivalists aren't there. It may not be Armageddon, but this is going to be bad. I strongly recommend that people copy the Mormons. That's all I have to say. You want to know what you should do? You should go to the Mormon website. I'm not a Mormon. And you should do it. They tell you what food to stock in, how to store it. It's like a gift to the general public. They're smart. Now they might be doing it for all kinds of reasons that are religious, but again, I say there's no harm to a good religion.
Right.
And what do? They have an aid society talking about the Mormons. They tithe 10% of their income into the church, and when the shit hits the fan for a Mormon, they take care of them. Period. End of story.
And you can't just treat the whole country, to hit the same question over and over. You can't just treat the country like that. Let's be American. Let's let that be our.
Well, look, the greatest period of growth and freedom in our history was the 19th century. I mean, the 19th century in America was the greatest period of economic growth in the history of the world. Nobody had ever, at the beginning of the 19th century, the per capita income of the average American, as well as almost everyone else in the world, was about $1 a day. Okay. In the span of 100 years, the per capita income grew by thousands and thousands and thousands of percent. The economy, the industrial revolution, the changes it brought, and what brought all that on was a combination of free enterprise and oil. Because when we hit oil in 1859 in Oil City, Pennsylvania, and John Rockefeller knew what to do with it, and he understood it was for more than just kerosene lamps, baby, that was it. Because that created productivity. Machines can do so much more work than people that creates more productivity for every worker running the machine. It turns them into like 10 men. That's what productivity means. And it unleashed and then of course we proceeded to fuck it up. And let me tell you, my friends, this democracy thing, get a grip on this. Democracy, historically, 100% of the time ends in tyranny. Always ends in tyranny, because the people forget that we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And that was intentional, because the founders knew that. Every democracy ends in tyranny because they start to believe in majority rule. And the key to the American republic is the protection of the individual, not the majority. That's what made America special. The Bill of Rights and the protection of the individual. It doesn't matter what every country protects the majority rights. Nazi Germany, the majority of Germans supported Hitler. Majority rules, until, of course, he ran the country off the cliff. But I mean, he was really popular. Majority rules is not a good thing. What makes our republic great is that we protect, it's the Bill of Rights. It's the absolute protection of your individual rights. And we are throwing them away in the name of security, sold to us by people who are spending money that's not theirs, and it's not ours either. They're spending us into a hole of debt that's beyond redemption, and there's no way out. And I'm not saying this, we're going to have to default. That's the way out. And then there's going to have to be a reset. And that's why I wrote a radical reset, so that there would be an alternative to what always happens. There's going to be people that come out of the woodwork who are going to sell a very simple solution to a very complex problem, and they're going to make it sound really, really good, and they're going to be very, very charismatic, and they're going to sell a lot of people who are not capable of critical thought for one reason or another a basket of goods, and we're going to end up living in a dictatorship, because that's what happens in a democracy. 100% of the time. I'm hoping to break it. Okay.
Right.
But I'm this pitcher in Phoenix, I mean, like, I'm not deluded. I mean, I understand. I have an audience of hundreds, I mean, I get it. But I know, and I know that my ideas are fringe. I mean, democracy by lottery, which is what anti-politism is, and it's a merit-based lottery, and you can read all about it, and it makes perfect sense when you read about it, believe me.
Or rather, republicanism by lottery. Right.
Well, yeah, it's Republican. Yes, it is. It's Republican. Thank you. That's better. It's republicanism by lottery. And it's designed, it creates an elite, but it's an elite that's open to anybody who achieves
democratic,
anything.
It is a democratic republic by lottery.
See, here's the thing. What anti-politism does, what a democracy by lottery does, is puts people into offices of duty instead of a career. That's what it does. So it becomes the expectation of it. So like Americans traditionally are raised to believe that
it flips everything upside down. You get into when you select your leaders by lottery and you have the parameters that you set forth, the incentives are totally changed, and that changes everything.
It changes the whole culture, because first of all, social studies suddenly becomes a really important class in high school. I mean, suddenly understanding how your government works and what the Constitution says, more Americans will become interested in it, because the ones that are achieving anything. Now, by the way, the ones who are losers are going to keep being losers. And you know what? That's okay. But don't pretend. Let's stop celebrating the failure. Let's celebrate the success. Let's celebrate the people that have done something. Now, since I've opened this can of worms and I sound like a horrible elitist, let me be clear of what I'm talking about. The meritocracy I'm talking about is anybody who has graduated with a bachelor's degree from a recognized university in anything. It doesn't matter. That's it. You're in. Because that proves you can finish what you start. And that's a huge thing in American life. Can you finish what you start? Okay, so anyone with a bachelor's degree or more, you're in. Secondly, if you don't have a bachelor's degree, that's okay. If you've started your own business, regardless of your background, and you have 10 or more employees and you've been in business 5 or more years, you're in. Now, why 5 or more years? Because as any entrepreneur will tell you, you don't want to take them out of their business within the first 5 years, because that's when it's going to fail if it's going to fail. And it would be really unfair to yank those people out of their companies during their formation phases. Okay. But after 5 years, if you've got 10 or more employees, you're meeting payroll and you're doing you've got a going enterprise going on, you should be in the meritocracy. You know what it is to meet a payroll. You know what it is to pay taxes.
Who runs their business, though, when they serve?
You do, because Congress becomes a part-time job. Because remember, and again, fact check me, Congress people spend 80 to 90% of their time raising money.
Right.
Okay. In anti-politism, there's no fundraisers. There's no money in politics at all. There's zero. So since anti-politism devolves all the state welfare functions to the states, what the federal government does is they meet once a year to do the budget. And they'll do the defense budget, the Department of State budget, the Department of Treasury budget. The Attorney General will have to stay a federal, because you have to have someone to chase down interstate criminals. You can't kill somebody in New York and run to California. So there has to be a U.S. attorney. But beyond that, that's all they'll do, and they'll just make the budget for the year. They'll vote on any treaties, because no treaty should be honored without the Congress. There's a reason for these rules, guys. They'll follow up on any appointments, judicial appointments by the president, that kind of thing. They'll get all that done and go home. It's a part-time job.
Right.
There's no reason to spend. And since they cannot be chosen again, it's a one and done, period for everybody. There's absolutely nothing to prepare yourself for. And you can also speak your mind and say what you know to be true, because you don't have to pretend. Yeah. There's no reason to pretend. And by the way, if you're selected, you can say no. This is not a draft. Mm-hmm. Okay. But of course not. Look, no one wants you to be there if you don't want to be there.
Right. Okay? That would be slavery.
No, it's not a draft. It's a selection. So basically the way it works is, do you want me to describe this, or should I just stop that?
No, go ahead. Finish it.
You want to go to, okay. So briefly, I'll finish up the meritocracy. So the self-employed that I laid out, the college degrees, and the third category is people in the top third of the income, of the average incomes. So in other words, if you've climbed the corporate ladder and you're in management and you've managed to work your way up and you're making in the top third of incomes, that's meritorious, regardless of whether you went to college or not. Plenty of people work their way up the ladder without going to college. But those are the three ways. Now, what's nice about this meritocracy is it's open to anybody. All you got to do is get up your ass and work at something. Start a business, go to school, climb the ladder, work hard at work. You can join the meritocracy. It also means that every kid in America really could be the president of the United States. Now they say that, but of course it's bullshit, because look how many Bushes we had. Right. I mean, right? I mean, come on. Right. So the bottom line is here, there'll never be a dynasty again. There'll never be a Kennedy. There'll never be a Bush family, because it's impossible. It'll just never happen. And the way anti-politism works is, instead of, in Arizona, for example, we have 9 congressional districts, and if you look at a map, it's ridiculous. It's all kinds of gerrymandered crap. In California, where you are, every state has this. In anti-politism, the states will be divided into congressional districts, the same 9. They'll still have 9, but by population in equal batches, as opposed to, without regard to just equal-sized geographic areas of population, roughly. You get my drift? Mm-hmm. Has nothing to do with demographics at all. Now, within those groups, there will be a census, and it's a voluntary census. You don't have to fill it out, but the people, they're going to ask you if you fall into these categories. Now, and no one's going to fact check you. We're not going to send out the police to see if you told the truth. The only person we're going to check the answers on is the person who gets selected. So there's really no point in lying, but if you want to lie, you're not going to go to jail for it. We're not going to make it a criminal offense to lie on the form. Okay. Right. But everyone, because I'm not a big fan of throwing people in jail for being stupid. Okay. I mean, you have the right. One of the greatest rights is the right to be stupid. That's why there are bankruptcy laws, by the way. They're very important. You have the right to fuck up. Okay. So, and to restart. Very important. By the way, bankruptcy laws are the foundation of our entire economy, but that's another discussion for another day. So, as you can tell, my mind goes everywhere all at the same time.
No, but I know you'll take me. Proceed.
So back down upon. Okay, so then we basically hold a lottery online and on television. You simulcast it on everything, and we use a ping pong ball machine. Everybody in the district, by the way, gets a number based on how many people in the district and how many digits. So if you have 1 million people, it goes from 6 zeros and a 1 to number 1 million and everything in between. Okay, and everybody knows their number. After you send in your form, the state emails you your number, or probably you submit. In fact, fuck them. See what a boomer I am. This will all be done online. Everyone will get a survey. Everyone will fill it out. It'll go in. Boom. You'll get your number right away. Your number 999,990, whatever the fuck you are. Okay. And then we hold a lottery in every congressional district using a ping pong ball machine. And the reason for that is that it can't be hacked. We have witnesses in the rooms to make sure the balls are all balls. There's no weights in them. No one's fucking around. We have, they do it all in the air. They whip through the balls, make sure everything's really good. They blow the numbers out, and whoever number is picked, that's the congressman.
Right.
That's it.
And then from there, they get together and they self-select the president.
Well, let me start. Okay, so the congressmen get a 4-year term, not a 2-year term. Okay, and they're chosen 6 months before the end of the last congressman's term, so they can get some on-the-job training.
I will stop you because we don't need to go
I'm getting into the weeds.
Yeah. The point is, get out of the weeds.
In the end, the president and vice president are selected by the Congress after being together for 2 years. And the idea behind that is when you work together in a group with a group of people for 2 years, you get to know pretty fast who's smart and who's stupid. And the whole basis of anti-politism is that you and I could randomly walk down the street of our city or our town and randomly pick out 535 people who collectively will have the same average IQ as the Congress of the United States, and maybe higher. Okay. But one thing's for sure, it won't be 57% lawyers. Okay. Which is ridiculous. It'll be a little mix of everything. There'll be some lawyers and some plumbers. And so you get a lot of different points of view. Okay.
It's very democratic. It sounds very democratic.
You'll also get a much better racial representation and gender representation because it's completely blind. And the only thing stopping anybody from being a part of this is doing something. Get up off your ass and do something. And since everybody in every race has been successful, there's plenty of successful black people, millions of them. Right. They just don't get the recognition that they deserve, but they're in, and anybody can join them if you do the right thing, right? Anybody can join. Right. So, but after I got this from serving in the Navy, when you serve on a submarine, as I did, or a ship, or you serve in a company, or anytime, and you work together with people, you right away figure out who's really. Don't you know that wherever you work, can't you figure out after a very short time?
Merit means something in the real world.
Right. And since these people are not politicians and they're not raising money and there are no political parties, there's no reason for political parties in anti-politism. There's nothing. Okay. Now,
George Washington might love this.
He might have loved it. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that there can't be issue advocates. Of course, if you want to advocate for your issue and go visit your congressman and explain to them why he or she should vote for this or that, you have every right under the First Amendment to do that. Okay. But you don't have to buy him lunch. You know what I'm saying? There's no money involved in this. You don't have to make a you can't. If you give him money, you're going to prison because that will be illegal. Campaign contributions of any kind will be illegal. So the bottom line is, after 2 years, they'll know who's smart enough to be the president. Come on. Think of the way I envision it is like the Catholic Church selecting the Pope only in public. Instead of in the Sistine Chapel with all the cardinals who know each other and figure out which cardinal has, I understand that they believe that they're motivated by God, and I think they're sincere, and I'm not trying to be, but really what's going through their head is God. They believe that God is telling them who's the right guy, which is really, and I believe, them telling themselves, but in the end, it's a meritocracy. This guy was chosen because for whatever reason, the other cardinals thought he was the guy. Okay. And for right or for wrong, and I'm not a Catholic and I'm not here to judge, and I have no opinion. But having said that, I want to do the same thing only in public, so everyone can see it, and let them select from, and the president and the vice president serve 4 years and they're done. That's it. Bye.
Yep. Yeah, no, there's a million reasons to be attracted to that, especially in this environment, and leaving
the only argument that you can make against it is we lose the experience of all these experienced people, to which I answer, look at their track record.
Right.
Fuck their experience. And we don't need their experience.
Yeah. Whether I talk to someone on the left or someone like yourself, everyone agrees that something doesn't feel right. And this is a radical solution.
We're all being manipulated by the algorithms. It's like guys, old boomers like me, how they get addicted to Fox News? Because they just tell them everything that they want to believe. Yeah, that Nancy Pelosi. Whew, what a bitch. They echo it back. Everything that, and they just amplify. And then on the left, I've watched MSNBC. That's not a news network.
Sure.
It's a propaganda outlet. Right. And those are just the mainstream ones. But if you go into YouTube, this. One of the things I hate about YouTube the most is if I show an interest in anything, I'm going to get deluged with shit about this thing.
Sure.
Even though I don't, like if I want to check out waterside campsites in Arizona, I really only need to find one video on that. I don't need 300 videos on visiting every campsite in Arizona. But it
illustrates the effect that this stuff has on us. Yeah.
So, but most people love getting echoed back what they believe. So why do people believe all this shit about Kamala Harris? Because that's all they hear, just the echo. Why do people believe that Donald Trump said that there are nice guys on both sides in Charlottesville, when in context that's not what he said? That's been debunked forever. Or why does Joe Biden keep insisting that Donald Trump said that servicemen are suckers when it's been debunked a million times? Because all they hear is this constant repetition. So they call him the liar because they don't know he's not lying, because they don't listen long enough to find out what he really said. They won't even Google to find it.
Okay. I think what you're getting at is, yes, something doesn't feel right. We're being manipulated, whether it's the algorithm, whether it's the mainstream media, whether it's the political system, the political class. We're being manipulated, and deep thinkers on all sides agree with that. And someone might listen to you today and say, okay, I like Herb, he's interesting and he's smart, a little too brash for me, or I don't necessarily agree with this policy. But no matter what,
I'm not running for you
no,
to follow
I
me.
know. I'm just saying people will agree. So you're maybe a fringe guest in a sense, but
I have every
people
intention of
agree.
running for office, just not now.
Okay. Well, we'll have to get to that another time.
I,
But
I plan to.
you're going to run again?
You want me to give it to you in a nutshell? What's going to have to happen?
Go ahead. We'll land the plane. We got 2 minutes.
Someone's going to have to be Cincinnatus. Someone's going to have to be Cincinnatus.
You're going to die on the hill. You're going to fall on this. You're going to let the sword fall on you.
No, that's not the story of Cincinnatus. Do you know the story of good old Cincinnatus?
Wrap it up with me. Tell me the story and we'll land it.
Before Hitler and Mussolini, the word dictator was not a bad word. Okay, all a dictator was a king that wasn't royalty. That's all it was. Okay, and in the Roman Republic, they actually created the office of dictator, and they did that because they understood that sometimes when the enemy is coming in and there's a big emergency, there's no time to have a meeting about it. So what they would do is the Senate would get together, and from amongst themselves, they'd pick the most respected and able senator in whatever the emergency was, and then they'd give him a 2-year office. He could not be rechosen. It was a one and done. And he would go in and solve whatever the problem was with dictatorial powers, but he couldn't violate the citizens of Rome. He couldn't violate being, all the protections, but he could otherwise do what he wanted. So the greatest of these was this Roman general named Cincinnatus. And Cincinnatus was, like I said, a general, and he had retired. He was an older guy. And one of the things that people don't realize, back in the time when the average age of people died at 40, if you made it to 21, you'd probably live to be 80. It's really interesting. If you looked at statistics, they had built up such immunity to disease. If they made it into their 20s, they'd probably live to be 80. They were old men. Okay, so anyway, and that's why they had great constitutions. So Cincinnatus was one of those men. He had been a really successful general. He had retired, and he was not a Roman. He was actually an Italian. He was living up in the hills in the northern Italy, and he was tending his grapes and all that kind of good stuff when the barbarians began to invade from the Germanic tribes in the north, and Rome was in big trouble, and they defeated the legions up there, and it was a big shitstorm. So they brought in Cincinnatus. He formed his legions. He marched up there. He slaughtered the barbarians. He ended the war in about, I think it was 2.5 weeks. And then he did something that no other dictator ever did. He resigned because he did what he came in to do. Every other dictator used the 2 years to fill up their private coffers. It was almost expected. Okay, Cincinnatus felt, I'm rich enough, and I'm an old man.
So he walked away before his term was complete.
Yeah, but here's the best part. He did it twice. So there was another barbarian invasion a few years later. Sure as shit, they went right back to Cincinnatus. This time it took them about 3 months to get rid of him. I think that time it was the Persians, or it was one of those Asiatics coming in. Anyway, to make a long story short, he defeated them. Took a few months, quit. America needs a Cincinnatus because this is not going to get fixed by a collective decision. There's going to have to be somebody who's going to be given, without any constitutional violation, essentially dictatorial powers. Call it what you want. And you can't violate the Bill of Rights, obviously, and you can't violate any constitution. But otherwise, the guy's work, you're going to have to make hard decisions that do not demand. Compromise is not always the right thing. When the shit really hits the fan, you got to rip it out at its root. And just like Javier Milei is doing in Argentina right now. Mm-hmm. Only he's not going to get his way all the way because he has to deal with his Senate. But I hope he succeeds. But America, where we're headed, is going to take a lot more than that. And the difference between a Cincinnatus and anyone else who's going to come up, and I see myself that way, frankly, is because I just don't give one flying fuck about money or power. I really, at this point, I don't know, because of my life experiences, I've just gotten to the point where I just don't care. I just want to leave the world a little better than I found it, so that my children and grandchildren have some prosperity to look forward to, because as it sits now, I'm terrified for them.
And so I guess you really believe that we have the state is the problem. The government is the problem. The corruption is within the government. That's what needs to be ripped out.
The corruption is legal. What's a campaign contribution but a legal bribe? Come on.
Yeah.
All they do is make legal their own corruption. But don't you spend your own money much more carefully than you spend?
Yeah.
If you walk down the street and you find $100 on the sidewalk, isn't your first inclination, what am I going to piss this away on?
Yeah.
Most of us would. Yeah, very few people save it, right? Sure. I would say, oh, found money. Let's go have some fun. It's like, by the way, when I go gambling, if I start winning, I don't give a shit if I lose it back. It was never my money.
Right.
It's just,
exactly.
So
right. When you disconnect the consequence from the decision, all hell breaks loose. Yeah. That's the point. And that's
you combine it. And now, because of social media, the only people that go into politics are literally sociopaths.
Yeah, I know.
And right and left, because you have
So anti-politism is the solution, and people really should buy your book, A Radical Reset, and learn more about it.
And they can go to the 1964plan.org, our nonprofit, and learn about it. And there are white papers on the, if you want to get a little taste, go read the free white papers at the 1964plan.org. And then it'll link to Amazon, and then you can buy the book while you're there.
And you want to make the world a better place. You really do. That's what you're telling me.
I personally, if this really came to pass and by some miracle my dream came true, I would do it. I would donate my entire salary, get it over with, and retire. I have absolutely no desire. I would be there and I would, by the way, select as a vice president the absolute best person I could find, because I'm definitely an A person in that sense. I'm not threatened by other people's intellect.
So you would hire Gavin Newsom?
You know who I would hire right now? You want me to honest to God tell you who I would hire
Jared
right now?
Polis.
Mitch Daniels.
Who the hell is that?
He's the former governor of Indiana and the former president of Purdue, former Republican congressman, former director of the Office of Management and Budget. Really the finest American alive today. And my choice would be Ben Sasse, the president of the University of Florida, former senator from Nebraska. Yeah,
Mitch Daniels.
Mitch Daniels.
And I'm going to check those guys out, and then we can pick up our next conversation about them.
No, I haven't even looked lately. He's old now, Mitch Daniels. Let me hold on 1 second.
He might even be alive. That's all right, Herb. I got to run. So we'll look into that later. But God bless you, brother.
Alive.
I love
you. He's alive. He's alive. He was born.
Mitch, sorry.
He's not that old. He's only born in 1949. So there you go.
No, I'm going to look both those guys up, and when we talk again, I'll tell you what I think that means about my assessment.
By the way, I would be happy with them being Cincinnati's too. I just don't think they're thinking about it. But if they want to just take the reins right up and just do it themselves, that'd be fine with me too. Ben Sasse.
I think I can learn a lot about you by studying those guys, so I will do that.
Check them out. I think you'll be impressed.
Yeah. Herb, always a fun time, and not only fun, but I want to. I'm being sincere. I've had you on many times, and what I'm doing is genuine, and I wouldn't have you back if I didn't think you were a genuine, authentic person. I do believe you are. Thanks. And I think you're a brilliant man, and so I appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Listen, I tell it the way I see it, and if people love me or hate me, it's up to them. I don't care. But I do care. I love you, everyone. Really, I do.
Right. Honestly, I know you do. I know. I think you're a great guy, and I think you have a lot.
It's not that I don't care. I do care. I just I'm impervious to criticism at this point in my life.
Yeah, it's all about, like I said, it's all about who's right with this political wisdom, with the economics. It's all about who's right. I could get you on.
Yeah, I know what if nobody's right? What if nobody's right? What if we could all figure it out better on our own?
Well, then something is right. That means that anarchism or anti-politism is
or libertarianism. But I live in the real world. There has to be some government. I understand, but as little as humanly possible. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And led by people who serve from duty, not ambition. Ambition is a dangerous thing when people are soon going to be able to live to be 150. In your lifetime, not mine, you will probably live to be 150. That's God bless you. And I'm sorry.
I think and the wealthy will of course live longer than the poor, and so we are in strange times. And let's not even get into it, Herb, because we could keep going. But we're in strange times, and maybe the need.
I don't believe in dystopian future, by the way, but we'll talk about that another time. No, I don't think there's going to be a dystopian future, but we'll talk about that.
Yes.
Listen, I'm eternally optimistic. That's why I came up with the plan. I figured, look. Maybe people, and because you've never seen me, but I'm really a great public speaker, really, really good. And I'm hoping that pays benefits at some point.
Right. Interesting. All right. So there's a lot to pick up on next time.
I'm completely immodest. I'm terrible at many things, but I'm great at that. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. All right. You've done it again, Herb. And we have some fun things to talk about next time. Ben Sass, Mitch Daniels, Why We're Not Dystopian. All right, buddy. Thank you so much.
Peace out.
Adios.
It's good
Later.
talking to you. Take care. Have a beautiful evening.
You as well.